that I wanted to marry a girl with whom I would work together. And I think it's a perfect way of marriage.
Being Andrée Rieu's writer, manager, and fiercest protector for over half a century, Marjorie Rieu was the invisible force behind her husband's ascent to fame. They overcame the classical world as one. However, due to a catastrophic turn in André's health, she is now saying farewell. While André rejoices with the rest of the world in his 75th year, Marjorie is stealthily making her exit. Something broke, and everything changed behind the scenes. Who was that strong woman who managed to keep everything together? In 2012, things began to fall apart. André Rieu, known as the King of the Waltz because to his immense reputation, had no intention of slowing down while he was at the peak of his career. With his Johann Strauss Orchestra, he was effortlessly hopping countries, performing concerts, TV specials, and making appearances in worldwide media, all while packed arenas. He appeared unstoppable for decades. Not even jet lag could halt him. He never took sick days or was late. However, something broke in July of 2010. André awoke around 3 o'clock in the morning while on vacation with Marjorie in Belgium. Suddenly, very literally, the world appeared to be whirling around him. He thought the floor had fallen out from under him as the ceiling and walls twisted and slanted. He was so sick with nausea and perspiration that he could hardly stand. At first, he disregarded it, thinking that maybe he was simply exhausted. In only 1 week, he managed to squeeze in studio sessions, Spanish classes, and last-minute preparations for his tour, to the point that he thought that maintaining an optimistic and industrious outlook may ward off disease. However, he couldn't muster a smile in the face of this. The next morning, the vertigo had persisted and had even worsened. A viral infection that affects the inner ear and interferes with the vestibular nerve, the nerve that regulates balance, was the diagnosis made by the doctors. Extreme vertigo, disorientation, and motion sickness can result from the brain receiving conflicting signals caused by inflammation. What a catastrophe for André. It wasn't just a little vertigo. He had trouble walking straight, practicing, and even holding his violin without experiencing a dizzy. He had a show scheduled for the following week in Amsterdam, and this is when things became serious. Not a little performance. 60,000 people showed out to the sold-out concert. However, a miraculous recovery was not possible this time. He was advised by his doctor to simply relax. For André and Marjorie alike, that was the turning point when their lives began to unravel. Marjorie Rieu is more than simply his wife. She is the unsung hero who supports him in all his endeavors. Her marriage to André began in 1975, marking the beginning of more than 4 decades of artistic, logistical, emotional, and romantic relationship. She is a language teacher and composer in her own right. Marjorie controls the empire's business side, writes and safeguards André's time and energy as he travels the world. However, no such strategy existed in 2010. After André was forced to postpone his tour in Australia, he also cancelled his shows in the UK. There were hundreds of occupations associated with these massive stadium events, from lighting crews and symphony musicians to stage managers and transportation teams. These weren't little local gigs. Before factoring in his own income, his monthly overhead was more than £25,000, and 120 people were directly or indirectly dependent on him for their paychecks. Thus, his illness was the result of a full-blown economic storm, not only a personal tragedy. Marjorie was there in the middle of it all. André had wanted to possess their castle in Maastricht since he was a little boy, and Marjorie kept everything together from their 15th century manor. She oversaw communications, kept the business solvent, and, most critically, kept André focused on his recovery. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to overcome his sickness. Requesting medicine, attempting to move, and practicing were all things he persisted in. Unfortunately, his body was uncooperative. Marjorie was the one who pointed out that he wasn't competing in a strength test, but rather in a survival one. The paradox? Andre had deluded himself into thinking he was immune to burnout for years prior to this. He was sure that if he could only keep his head positive, he could prevent his body from collapsing. On this particular occasion, though, even the most ardent performer reaches a ceiling. He was so bedridden for 3 months that he couldn't even tour. He felt terrible guilt, as if he had disappointed everyone. Even playing with his grandkids was too much for him. His profuse perspiration was like menopause, he said at one point. This wasn't only an ear infection, it served as a wake-up call. He laughed about it, but the reality was obvious. To be sure there wasn't a tumor, doctors performed procedures, including a brain scan. Even though the scans were negative, the recuperation process was intense. Instead of magic drugs or quick fixes, he had to endure physical therapy, balance retraining, and a battery of boring but essential exercises. Standing on one leg, making figure eights with his feet, and sweeping his gaze up and down, side to side, and 30 minutes every day. It worked, slowly and brutally. The emotional toll, however, persisted even as Andre's physical recovery progressed. Anxieties about relapsing pervaded every aspect. Anxieties is a major contributor to the 5% recurrence rate of vestibular neuritis. So not only did Andre have to reevaluate his schedule, but his entire existence. Marjorie was brought in once again at that point. 2 lists were drafted with her assistance. Playing music, giving concerts, and making records were all things he enjoyed doing for a living, and they were all listed in one place. On the other hand, there was all the stuff that depleted him. Meetings, negotiations, speeches, press events, and operations management. Much more items were on the second list. Thus, they chopped it together. Marjorie was able to protect him from the rest of his life once they cleared his schedule and changed his priorities so that he could concentrate solely on music. That choice was more than simply a matter of burden. It was a matter of survival. On stage, Andre appeared unstoppable, but Marjorie was wise. As he was at his worst, she stayed by his side, making sure no one witnessed how near he came to breaking down. Sweating from fever, stumbling over his own feet, ashamed even to go to the restroom. There was never any pretense to their partnership. Marjorie isn't often seen with him on stage or in public. Indeed, she had previously expressed her desire to not be identified solely by her status as Marjorie Rieu's wife. She is an independent thinker with her own personality and career. The power that exists behind the scenes becomes apparent in these kinds of instances. They have 5 grandkids today, in addition to raising 2 boys together. The castle where Andre had his first piano lessons as a child is now their home. Even when the world around her began to spin, Marjorie managed to keep one foot firmly planted on the ground among the whirlwind of fame, music, and spotlights. Andre returned to performing in 2013. The doctors were wrong. He got better sooner than expected. Even with the stabilizing effects of the eye exercises, therapy, and lifestyle adjustments, his terror persisted. Marjorie found herself in a new position. More than simply a tour supporter, she was seeing the guy she loved confront his limitations and trying all in her power to keep him from going over the edge again. Fans may not always realize the sacrifices Andre has made to keep his dream alive when they watch him perform today, smiling, waltzing, and conducting a 60-member orchestra. Plus, the woman who helped keep things together while they were falling apart goes unnoticed. That was only the start, though. Marjorie knows better. Something new happened to Andre in 2017, and it made him reevaluate his health, his decisions, and the things that were truly important to him. On this occasion, the source of the pressure was not external, such as an illness or a postponed trip, but rather internal. Andre knew something had to give after his second serious health crisis in as many years. It all mounted up quickly between the constant touring, directing a 60-piece orchestra, handling production logistics, and satisfying a worldwide fan base. The white flag was flying from his body, and he paid attention this time. He then brought in reinforcements, such as a personal trainer, a new eating plan, and a new regimen that prioritized strength training, endurance, and enough rest. It was a matter of survival, not vanity. To stay up with the fast tempo of his orchestra and to avoid falling off the stage, he began exercising often. In order to aid in his internal recovery, his trainer made dietary adjustments, tracked his movement, and provided overall support. It was hard to deny the effects. He improved physically, slept better, and made more progress in less time. However, it continued beyond that. His entire orchestra joined in as well, moved by the sudden change in their commander. Musicians from the Johann Strauss Orchestra quickly joined in, scheduling Zumba sessions, signing up for marathons while on tour, and more. Atmosphere behind the scenes shifted. Making health a priority became second nature. And if you're asking how a man in his 70s manages to see all those 8 o'clock shows, the answer is simple. This is how he manages to stay awake, disciplined, and supported by a team that follows his example for 5 or 6 days straight, crossing various time zones. Right up to midnight. Andre now maintains a tight circle. Inside his violin bag, he keeps images of his family. His sons send him photos of his grandchildren before each performance. So he doesn't hurt himself when performing. He keeps his wedding ring on a chain instead on his finger. These are more than simply routines. They provide stability as you go from city to city and give your all under the bright lights of the stage. Marjorie sits in that castle in Maastricht, away from the cameras, to see every performance. It's more than simply a sign of achievement, though. She can make a difference even when she isn't the center of attention. Writing his biography, assisting with concert planning, handling logistics, and keeping him focused on what matters most have all been some of her many behind-the-scenes contributions over the last 4 decades. Whatever drew them together in the 1970s is still at the core of their relationship now. He was the kid she met at his sister's dancing class party. She was a language instructor in Nijmegen. They wasted little time falling in love upon reconnecting years later. However, not all individuals agreed. Marjorie's flower power attitude ran counter to Andre's parents' rigid standards, so they weren't convinced she was a good match. Regardless, they continued forth. They were both brought up in strict households and taught the value of hard work. Everything they constructed was based on that desire. Andre began performing in local salon groups in 1978 and had already joined the Limburg Symphony Orchestra. Concurrently, Marjorie learned that she was expecting a child. In addition to taking care of their families, they were also teaching music and performing at retirement communities. Things were chaotic, to put it mildly. However, they persisted. At the event booth, Marjorie helped arrange events, produced brochures, and wrote the talking points between songs. Dreaming of theaters and international tours, they would sometimes do free concerts in tiny spaces for a few of people. Thanks to their 1994 album Strauss & Company and the viral smash The Second Waltz, they finally broke through. It wasn't chance, but years of hard work paying off. Not everything went according to plan, though. They were on the verge of bankruptcy because of that Schönbrunn Palace copy from 2008. Marjorie remained cool, collected, and cautious, while she saw money go out the door quicker than it came in, which gave her restless nights. Eventually, their son Pierre became involved with the organization, bringing an economic acumen that complemented Andre's creative flair. There have been no fresh images of her or interviews with the media since then. and she continues to avoid the limelight even now. She avoids being identified by traveling under her maiden name. That's purpose, not timidity. Marjorie keeps a low profile as Andre's public persona grows with each tour, allowing room for both of them to breathe. When he's at home, Andre moves more slowly. Carefully prepared organic dishes are what he makes for evening. Andre personally constructed the orangery, their favorite place to relax and unwind. Underneath paintings inspired by Tuscany, you'll find koi fish swimming among exotic flora and vibrant butterflies. After the mayhem of traveling, he finds solace here, and they use it as a springboard for their next great adventure. Why was Andre able to develop such an unbeatable drive, though? Who instructed him to stake everything on his goal despite the overwhelming odds? Andre Rieu's father-in-law, who may have been the true key to his success, is the one guy who can be traced back to the beginning of this response. Edgar Kan wasn't a famous conductor since he never performed on stage. His legacy, nevertheless, permeated Andre's music. One of Edgar's accomplishments was bucking the Holocaust. In 1932, his father fled Berlin and sought refuge in Maastricht. The remainder of the family came 2 years thereafter. During the war, Edgar hid out with a Dutch girl named Nelly, who would go on to marry Edgar and be Andre's mother-in-law. In order to save the survival of Jewish families, Nelly put herself in harm's way by joining the Dutch resistance. After some time had passed, Andre received a letter from an Israeli family expressing their gratitude to Nelly for rescuing their grandma. Not as some faraway story, but as the heritage his marriage had bound him to, that moment lingered in his consciousness. Following that was Edgar's record library. Not only did Andre get a lifelong companion in Marjorie in 1975, but he also entered a whole new musical universe. Edgar's most valued asset was not monetary wealth or autographed items, but rather a record collection including over 300 tracks. Andre learned a new language, heard a new kind of music, and experienced a new rhythm from the album. Although Andre had previously spent his formative years immersed in the music of classical greats like Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms, he was introduced to operetta, 1920s tunes, and, yes, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles through Edgar's recordings. It was like entering a whole other world for someone who had grown up in a very regimented and traditional musical family. Not only did Andre listen, he took it all in. With Edgar's taste and Marjorie's early impact as their cornerstones, that record collection laid the groundwork for the Johann Strauss Orchestra's initial performances. It molded the repertoire, the attitude, and even the branding, the energy, the blend of nostalgia and fun. Edgar's effect was more emotional than technical. Decades after his death, his legacy lives on in Andre's ability to tap into the emotion underlying music. The legendary klezmer composition Hava Nagila is almost a staple in Andre's concert repertoire. With more than 14 million views on YouTube, his 2010 rendition is among the most viewed classical music videos on the internet. That's no accident. It's a tribute to Edgar, to the past, and to the strength of those who, despite losing everything, managed to create something new. Andre takes great delight in carrying that weight. In Israel, for example, the audience goes absolutely wild when he performs. Flags fly, and he responds with Israeli favorites like Jerusalem of Gold, incorporating local culture into his world tour. Since 2018, he has made many concerts in Tel Aviv, and each one has been more of a reunion than a performance. In the background, Edgar is still being guided by his tale. Because Andre is aware of the family's origins and the fact that everything nearly ended before it started, he finds solace in music as a means of celebrating life. Just keep on dancing, dreaming, and moving forward. The message is clear. Andre continued to perform even after lockdown, when venues were deserted and shows were postponed. From December 19th to January 3rd, people from all around the globe were able to see his unique virtual concert, Magical Maastricht, which he put together using video from previous concerts and made cakes for his neighborhood. Instead of reducing his speed, he increased it. On the occasion of his 75th birthday in 2025, he will host a global film festival called The Dream Continues. This will be more than simply a rundown of his best works. It will be an opportunity to witness his legacy unfold in cities all over the globe, from New York to Vienna, Bahrain to Sydney. Through his favorite global performances, André crafts a journey. An amazing rendition of Music of the Night from The Phantom of the Opera stands out. Another is a heartfelt duet he performs with his brother Robert, called Pizzicato Polka, in which the two of them recall happy times spent visiting Maastricht as children. In the midst of the numbers, André reveals his soul, spilling forth anecdotes, life lessons, and passions. Emma is the next one. She has been traveling the globe with André and the Johann Strauss Orchestra since 2024, performing in countries such as Mexico, Chile, Bahrain, Colombia, and many more. Having her on stage signifies that André's story is continuing to grow. He has no plans to slow down. Rather, he is actively seeking out fresh perspectives, collaborating with like-minded individuals, and preserving the heritage. The big picture becomes clear when you consider how a young man from Maastricht, who started out with a used violin, became one of the world's best-selling classical musicians. A guy brought up in a traditional household, a young couple putting on gigs in nursing homes, a desire ignited by record albums and the need to survive during what is war, and a career that transcends decades, countries, and musical styles. It all boils down to the unsung hero, the one who kept the limelight on everyone else but never stole the show themselves. The music's soul was laid by Edgar Kan, and Marjorie continued his work by incorporating her father's legacy into every choice, arrangement, and performance. Therefore, Marjorie isn't walking away today from the limelight, the tour buses, and the late hours spent on stage. She's only stepping back since she has fulfilled her role. Even while everyone sees André, she laid the groundwork. The dream, which was scarcely a flicker, she took with her. From war-torn Berlin to packed stadiums on 5 continents, André's narrative carries with it every note, as Marjorie observes from a secluded corner while he plays to sold-out crowds in Tel Aviv, Sydney, and Vienna. It wasn't fame that started this adventure. It was love, records, resilience, and unselfish support. Now, what happens next in the music? That brings us to our last inquiry. The waltz goes on, of course, what with André's 75th birthday in the past, Emma's ascent through the ranks, and the orchestra's continued global traveling.